Welcome to the wonderful world of wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Kim Simone and Mark Lindsay, and every week we bring you trending topics from the wine world. Hello, everyone, and welcome again to the wonderful world of wine. I am your co-host, Kim. I'm here with my friend, Mark. How are you doing this week, Mark?
Hi, Kim. How are you? And hello to our listeners again.
Yes, hello, everyone. I'm doing well. There's definitely some things going on in the wine world. We're mostly keeping our eyes on fires in California and Oregon and Washington. So that's sort of the big thing at the moment, but we're still keeping track of what's going on with the restaurant side of the industry, because that definitely impacts the wine world as well. So there's always something going on, isn't there?
Yeah, lately it's more bad news we're reporting than good news, but we'll keep our listeners updated as we keep researching it, Kim.
Yeah. So there is one thing that is, I guess you could kind of call it a current event. I'm sure many of our listeners watch the show Shark Tank. And there is wine that pops up on there every once in a while, whether it is new ways to serve wine, sell wine, preserve wine. And host Kevin O'Leary has this stat that he has actually shared a couple of times over the last few years about the average price of a bottle of wine and how much of that wine at that price point is sold across the country. So I thought this was kind of an interesting stat that he threw out there.
Yeah, and as soon as I heard it, Kim, and you agreed that we should look into this, because I'm a huge Shark Tank fan, and I think the episode that drew my attention to his comment, someone was promoting a wine. It was like a catnip for cats that was based on wine, and he was then saying this stat, and he said 97% of wine sold in America sell for under $12.99. So right away I sent Kim a message and I said, Kim, I just heard this. I heard him say it before. I just can't understand this. And that's how he would always use that stat. Anytime someone brought a wine product to him, to say the price has to be under this or you just can't sell it in the United States. So I sent Kim a message. Kim, we have to talk about this. And we did our own little research. So I'm interested in what you found out, Kim.
So I think this stat is bogus, personally. What's interesting was the way that I started out doing some research on this was I Googled him and I Googled this comment from Shark Tank. And he's made this same statement at least 3 different times over 3 different years. And then
Yes.
the number is always changing.
Yes,
So
I'm so happy to hear you say that. I can't believe it either. Yeah,
So
go ahead,
in
Kim. I'm sorry.
2014, his statement was 97% of wines sold in America sell for under $10 a bottle. He said this back in 2014. Then in 2017, he said 97% of wines sell under $12 a bottle. And then in 2018, he raised it to $15 a bottle. So his threshold but somehow he's always at this 97%.
Yeah.
And I
That's
don't
huge.
really know where he's getting that, because I have found other documents that are from well-respected research firms and financial firms that track this kind of stuff that actually say it's closer to 83% of wines that are purchased in the United States sell for under $15 a bottle. And this is the most recent data that I could get. So I looked, let's see, I have it right here. It's a wine industry report published by a bank in California called the Silicon Valley Bank, and they publish an annual State of the Wine Industry report. And the most recent data we have is their 2019 report, which has data through 2018. And that one, like I said, says that 83% of wines that are sold in the U.S. are sold for under $15 a bottle.
Wow.
Not 97%
Yeah.
and not $10 a bottle.
So we're actually on the same page, because all the research, I did see the 2014 saying under $10. I saw the 2017 comment he made. I could not find the year of the episode that I noticed this on, where he said it was 14.99, but I did find another 2018 article in March where he stated 97% was 14.99.
Yeah.
And at that time, he also stated the $15 to $20 range of wines being sold is only a 3% category, which I think is another number that is totally strange.
I'm going to see what this Nielsen report said, because that's where the data from the Silicon Valley report came from. And
your number, though, is interesting, Kim, because I didn't see an 83% number. I did see another wine report from 2018 that said 78%. The average price is $10.
I did a lot of adding together of categories, because there was a chart in this report that was retail sales, what goes up and what goes down, and they listed the last few years. So it was 2013 through 2018. And in that category, the 15 to 20, it's anywhere between like 8% to 10%, this report is saying. So this report is saying that for the most recent year that they have data for, 10% of wines that were sold were between $15 and $19.99.
Yeah, and the 18 report said it was a double-digit growth. It didn't give a percentage, but double-digit growth at $15 to $20 range for wines.
So I think what we're looking at is different groups are crunching numbers in different ways. So they're getting their information from different places. So that's one of the things that I think is making it a little bit confusing, because there's more than one source about how you could get these numbers. You know, do you from official tax documents? Is it purchasing from the wholesalers? You know, where do these numbers actually come from? But I don't feel like that 97% figure makes any sense just from what we see in the real world. No.
I mean, he has a huge wine company. He's invested in most of the things that have gone to the Shark Tank. I can't see why he keeps saying that number, knowing people like ourselves and other listeners saying, man, that doesn't sound right.
But even in his own stores, because he has these large wine shops, they can't possibly only be selling wines under $10 a bottle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And a lot of the research from the 18 report, Kim, was saying this is all off-premise sales. It does nothing to do with restaurants figuring into that price point.
Right.
So one of the stats was 55% of the wine sold under $8, but it doesn't include box wine. So it's not bulk wine sales that they do an average. So say you had a 3-liter box and it comes down to an average of $8. They don't even include in that category.
Yeah. And if a different group is including that in their category, it would definitely change the numbers and change the percentages.
And they're saying there was negative growth at anything below $8. So now I'm thinking, I have to ask Kim this. Where are people getting these wines that are under $8 in this range at so much volume? I mean, everybody knows like Trader Joe's.
Who do you mean people?
Consumers? Wine consumers. Like when you go in a store, what percentage of wines on the shelves do you see that's a 750 milliliter are under $8? Not
very many. Unless you're going to some place that has proprietary labels. So like a Trader Joe's. Because there are plenty of things on their shelves that are like $4, $5, $6 a bottle.
All right. So even Trader Joe's, looking at the wine wall in Trader Joe's, do you think over 50% of their wines are under $8 or under $10?
Maybe.
Yeah. I just think that
I haven't paid that much attention. I can go look.
For that huge amount of wines he's saying to be sold at that price point, the wines you're seeing on a shelf or in stores has to be way over 50%.
Yeah.
I just don't see it. We've been in the industry a long time. I just, as a consumer, never mind a wine buyer and a wine geek, I just don't see that price point in that much volume.
If you're a proprietor of a store and you're selling pretty much only wines in that price point, your volume has to be so high to make up for such a slim margin that you have to like really be selling a lot of bottles of wine. If you're only making like $1 or 50 cents per bottle, you need to sell a lot of wine at that, $5 price point or $6 price point.
Yeah, and we talked about costs like the $2 chuck. I think it's like $4 now. How much is actually, going into the product at that price point? Are you familiar with the guy? I believe we've talked articles on him before, but the wine conundrum guy. He
Yes.
calls himself the cheap wine guy.
Yes.
So he did a report in 2010 to 2011 that I found saying the average price of wine sold in the U.S. at that time, now this is 10, 11 years ago, was $6.22.
The average price.
The average price of a wine being sold in the United States at
so
that
if everything
time.
being sold, you average it out, you get six
Yeah,
bucks or so.
yeah, which to me is crazy, right? And 1 in every 4 bottles sold, he said at that time, is less than $3.
Yeah, I don't even know what you could buy for under $3 a bottle.
Yeah, I just don't understand it. 9 out of 10 bottles, he said, sold is less than 12. So
that's that, and that would be that 90%.
Yeah. So then I'm thinking, okay, maybe I'm way out of the loop and I'm buying expensive wines, over $15 all the time. When I Googled, what wines can I buy for under $8? And I found very few things that popped up, like review sites or any even stores or retailers that had a section that said under. I mean, years ago, there was a big thing like the TUFA section, right?
Yeah.
You were in retail, right?
Yep.
What
Yeah,
was
we
your
had giant
TUFA
TUFA
section?
sections.
At that time, years ago, it was 2 for 10, 2 for 12, 2 for 14.
And then it started creeping up, and it was 2 for 15, and then 2 for 16.
Yeah. Now 2 for 15, 2 for 25, that range is more common. You don't see 2 for 8s,
No.
2 for 10s like that. You'd have to pay for a case of wine, you have to buy under $50 a case, which is like, you can't see that anymore. The whole thing is just kind of baffling to me. I also saw another report came in January of 2019. It said, which was going the other way now, it says consumers are buying wine at higher price levels. And they said, quote, an ongoing premium trend in wines, which goes against all of this again. And we didn't even talk about restaurants, but they're saying the off-premise average was, off-premise, no, they said a point, it didn't make sense. Let's get away from restaurants. I went off key here. They said the off-premise average is 20% of it pays over $40, which that was in the same report saying that 55% is under $8. So
yeah, that makes no sense.
Makes no sense, right?
No sense at all.
So the whole Kevin O'Leary thing, I just feel when he says it, it just gets me so angry. And I'm glad you got the same research I did on it.
Yeah, this is one of those things where I think it's important for people to use a little bit of common sense and don't believe every stat that you hear, because the data, I mean, I'm not saying he's skewing the data intentionally, but he could be working from data that gets that information in a very, very different way from somebody else. So there's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of ways to calculate. And then you have to think about, well, if I'm an everyday wine drinker, do I want to be drinking those wines that are $4 a bottle? Maybe you do in certain circumstances. I certainly do enjoy my inexpensive bottles of Trader Joe's wine from time to time.
Yeah.
But, just sort of think it a little rationally with a little common sense. And
So as a wine buyer, Kim, my, things that make me happy is finding a bottle I can sell for $10 that I think is just good.
Sure.
Good to drink.
Yeah.
I'm never thinking, $8, $6. I can't even think of a time someone brought me something in the door that would retail for that on my shelves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's hard. I mean,
when you were selling
10 years ago, 15 years ago, it was so much easier to have someone sell you a case of wine that came in under $100 that you would sell, somewhere around
$10. Yeah.
But it's a lot harder these days. It's a lot harder.
Wow.
I mean, my sweet spot for wines that I use in my classes and in my tastings is 12 to 25. I mean, there is some really good value things at 10 out there, but for me, I feel like it's 12 is the place to start, and then go up from there.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm glad we got that out there. And if our listeners have another point of view on that, we'd love to hear it. And what do you think about the 97% being sold? And if it is true, tell us where it is so Kim and I can stock up on some of this.
And we love to do this kind of research. So any new information, even if it is different from the data that we found, we'd be happy to hear it.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, and we are your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. If you'd like to get more information about Kim, please go to her website at vinitaswineworks.com. If you'd like to get more information about myself, please go to franklinliquors.com. For more information on our show, you can find us on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. We love any questions or comments. Welcome back to The Wonderful World of Wine. Next, we have an article that Kim's been excited to talk about for a while now. It was in Food and Wine magazine, and of course, it has to do with sparkling wine and more related to champagne. And a stat saying that because of the pandemic, champagne sales, Kim, are really down.
This is another sad story. We seem to be bringing up bad news more and more these days when it comes to wine. Yeah, this is a tragic article from Food and Wine, that because of the pandemic and because of people not being able to dine out in restaurants as much as before, and B, I don't think people really find much to be celebrating these days, and most people will purchase champagne as a celebratory beverage and not just to have with your chicken cutlets on a Thursday night. Because consumption of champagne is down, there's less impetus to actually make it this year. So there are a lot of grapes that are just gonna kind of not even be turned into champagne, and that a lot of the grapes from the vineyards are just going to be let rot because it doesn't make any sense to make champagne out of them. And I'm like, oh, this is so sad.
Yeah, I knew you'd be sad about it, Kim. I'm sorry. I
gotta go buy more champagne.
Make you happy again, because this was one of those articles when I saw it. I've seen so many articles going the other way on champagne production that I don't know why this article. I mean, obviously the sales, people are watching their money. There's, like you said, the restaurant sales are way down. There's no one having weddings and huge amounts of champagnes not flowing at social events. But there was also other reports saying that champagne was up like 70%, and that they want to actually do things with the production levels because it's such a great harvest. They're going to cut down what they're going to allow to be bottled, but not because of the pandemic, because they don't want to overproduce. So I saw it both ways.
Thank you for that ray of light.
Yeah. Did you see any
ray of sunshine?
But I mean, there was a lot of bad news in this Food and Wine article.
Yeah.
That was just one thing I had to say to you. My other thing I want to bring up early in the conversation about the champagne is, if the trend where the restaurants were hurting and retail was hurting because no one was spending the money, why did they play games with champagne? Why don't they? Like, I'll give you for instance, being in retail at the end of last year, the distributor had hit their number, say, for what they wanted to sell this year. So at the end of the year, they didn't bring in any champagne, which was probably good for them because this year they couldn't sell it. But I couldn't get champagne at the end of last year because the distributor hit their number and didn't want to bring any more in. So things like that, to me, annoy me with champagne. And the other thing is, they never, at this point, why not lower it a little bit?
That was the thing that annoyed me about this situation, was just that. And I like your phrasing of them playing games, because that seems like that's part of what this whole article was saying, was that there's a lot of manipulation that doesn't have to happen, except that the producers don't want to take a hit and they don't want to lower the price of their particular bottle of champagne. So say, whatever your brand is, they want to protect the reputation and the integrity of the brand, and they don't want people to know that they can produce it and sell it for $25 a bottle and it'll be just as good. And it's more of this inflated, reputation driven, everyone knows that our bottle costs $50 a bottle, so we have to keep it at $50 a bottle, or else people are going to get used to it at a lower price point, and then we're never going to be able to sell it for that higher price point again. So that, I think, along similar lines to what you're feeling, that was what really was kind of annoying me. I'm like, just, if you don't destroy the crop, just, deal with this the rest of the way that the rest of us are dealing with this situation.
Yeah, so, and also on that same point, Kim, when true champagne, once it's harvested this year and made and bottled, that vintage usually is not released for what? Minimum
years.
2 years, 3 years?
Even the non-vintage, just their, regular straight cuvee house style, we're not going to see that for 2 years. Like that juice that was harvested right now, we're not going to see for more than 18 months away. So say 2 years away. So yeah,
So how can
maybe this
they?
article's information or research was a little funny.
Yeah, well, the numbers to me didn't add up because that would mean this year's low sales is impact on the harvest of 2-3 years ago and what was in the cellar. No big deal. If you wanted to move it, lower it, or just save it.
Or maybe it's a space issue. Maybe
Yeah.
they're counting on selling a certain amount, a certain number of cases this year, and then they need that space that's moved out for the new vintage. So that could be part of it.
And they were saying on the space thing, they were saying it's like 100 million bottles
It's a
that
lot.
they fear will go unsold this year, which will cost that industry about $2 billion.
Right.
$2 billion. So I just don't see, why is this a problem when it's a product that will last,
Mm-hmm.
or they can do things with it, and we're still going to have New Year's, which is where everyone's still going to celebrate with it. So
Even if we're still just stuck in our houses, we'll still pop open a bottle of champagne.
yeah, and like you said, the champagne regulators were saying that they're going to regulate less production this year. So actually wasting the fruit or not allowing them to produce as much. So interesting year for champagne.
Well, I want to do more research on this since you gave me that little bit of sunshine about maybe this is not 100% the case of what's going on. So I want to do a little more reading and seeing what's out there with other people's opinions for how
I don't think
champagne is
it's as
going
bad as you think.
Thank you.
But I mean, definitely it's down, but according to this report, but it makes kind of sense with restaurants and stuff. But
yeah, absolutely.
don't worry. There's
Champagne
you'll
is
still
not
have your
going
spot.
away.
It's not going away. It's still on the shelf.
You're listening to The Wonderful World of Wine, exploring all things wine with you. We are your hosts, Mark and Kim. You can find more information about Mark at his website, franklinliquors.com, and more information about myself at vinitaswineworks.com. It's an interesting little article that we ran across in USA Today, of all places, talking about wine-related things. And I thought this one was really timely because it was how to use wine corks to repel fruit flies. And I was like, I thought I knew everything there was to know about wine corks, and I never heard the fruit fly thing before. Was this one news to you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about fruit flies and your invention with the cup to trap them.
It's not my invention.
Yeah, I've never heard of
But it
using
works.
a natural cork to
Me neither.
draw them in.
Yeah. So the idea is that fruit flies don't like the smell of cork. So we're not talking every single cork that comes out of a bottle of wine. It has to be natural cork. It has to be clean. It has to be dry. It can't have any residual little bits of wine or wine crystals on there. And the idea is that the corks, because they're porous and they absorb moisture, they'll absorb moisture and some aroma and some other compounds that ripening fruit give off. And the fruit flies just don't like the smell of corks, and so they will stay away from your bowl of fruit if you throw a few clean, natural corks in there.
So you're putting corks in some sort of jar with some sort of fruit, and is that what they're saying, Kim? And then the fruit, it gets absorbed into the cork?
So what I tried this. So what I usually do is I have a bowl or two on my kitchen table that has bananas and apples and, all that stuff that my kids like to eat. And at this time of year, we definitely do get the fruit flies that come in. And once those bananas start to get a little brown and soft, they're everywhere. So I tried this in a bowl with a couple of bananas and a couple of apples. And I threw, I think, 5 corks in there. And I did a couple of different kinds. So I did some that were champagne corks and then other ones that were just, the regular shaped cork, but all natural cork. I cleaned them. I threw them in there. And one of my bowls, it didn't work at all. I think those had tomatoes in there, and the fruit flies still really wanted to go to the tomatoes. But in the fruit bowl, it actually worked. They stayed out. It was pretty amazing.
So, so they're not like clinging to the cork and dying. It just
No,
repels.
they just don't. They just don't go around the bowl. Yeah,
nice.
It's not a killer of the fruit flies. It's more like repellent.
Yeah. So what were they
repellent.
saying the cork releases that they don't like?
It
It's at
didn't
least an
really
odor?
specify. It
No?
didn't say. I think it's an odor that the fruit flies can smell, but that we can't, obviously, and they just don't like it. So that did work. And the article was saying that now there are some producers that are making bowls specifically for fruit that are made from cork. So the bowl itself has like a cork lining on the inside, and you put your apples in there, and the fruit flies will stay away. So that might be an interesting Christmas present
Oh, that's a
for
great
the
idea.
wine lover on your list.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And I have a million corks too, so I'll have to
Yeah.
try it out. Now, the ones you used, they had no like red staining or anything on them that
They
would.
were still stained, but I had washed them off. So there wasn't any like lingering odor of wine or anything. I think it was just the color.
Yeah, because they were saying be careful, make sure, like you said, it's dry and it's clean. Because if you just had stuff hanging on that cork, it's still going to attract them more than
Right.
they
Because
take
we
them
know
away.
fruit flies really do love wine. So
And I'm glad that you always go the next step, Kim, and actually do the experiment with these things. You
I
know?
figure if we're going to talk about it, we might as well try it,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, thank you. And I'm sure the listeners are thanking you, and they're probably going to do it because you did it now.
So this is a new thing in my kitchen. The fruit bowl has corks in it.
Thank you for joining us today on the Wonderful World of Wine. We've been your hosts, Mark Lindsay and Kim Simone, exploring all things wine with you. You can find our past episodes on SoundCloud or iTunes, and you can send us messages on Facebook at The Wonderful World of Wine. Cheers.
Wine, wine.